My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old. The moment my relationship ended was quiet enough that the dishwasher was still the loudest thing in the room. It was a Thursday evening in our apartment in Denver. The kitchen lights were warm, the kind that make everything look softer than it actually is. I had just come home from work carrying a bottle of champagne and a folder with a signed contract inside. A deal I had been working on for 4 months had finally closed that afternoon. I remember placing the bottle on the counter and hearing the soft glass tap against the marble. "Good news," Ryan asked from the living room without looking up from his phone. "Very good news," I said. He walked into the kitchen then, already dressed to go out. Button-down shirt. Hair fixed carefully. The kind of effort he hadn't shown at home in weeks. "For what?" I asked. "Dinner," he said casually. "Claire's in town." Claire was his ex. He said it the same way someone might mention a coworker or an old neighbor. I stood there for a second, holding the folder against the counter. "I thought we could celebrate tonight," I said. "The Westbrook property closed." He shrugged slightly. "You didn't tell me earlier," he replied. I already made plans. The dishwasher hummed behind me. A faint smell of lemon soap drifted through the kitchen. "I wanted to surprise you," I said. Ryan finally looked up. Not apologetic. Just mildly irritated, like the timing was inconvenient. "We can celebrate tomorrow," he said. I took a slow breath. "This is the 4th time you've gone out with her this month," I said quietly. He leaned back against the counter and crossed his arms. "If you can't handle me seeing my ex," he said, "then maybe we should just break up." He said it quickly, like a line meant to end the conversation. For a moment, neither of us moved. The refrigerator compressor clicked on. Somewhere upstairs, a chair scraped across a floor. I watched his face carefully, waiting for him to correct himself. He didn't. So I nodded once. "Okay," I said. That was the moment he realized something had shifted. "What do you mean, okay?" he asked. "You suggested we break up," I said calmly. "I agree." He blinked. I walked past him into the bedroom and opened the closet. He followed me a few seconds later, standing in the doorway. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Packing." A suitcase sat on the top shelf. I pulled it down and placed it on the bed. Ryan gave a short laugh. "You're being dramatic." I didn't answer. I folded 2 shirts and placed them neatly inside the bag. Then my laptop. Then a small envelope that had been sitting in my desk drawer for months. He hadn't noticed that envelope before. Inside it were 3 printed screenshots and a hotel receipt. I zipped the suitcase halfway and paused. Ryan was still leaning against the doorframe, waiting for me to stop. But I didn't stop, because by that point, the decision had actually been made 2 weeks earlier. Just not by him. And the reason was sitting quietly in that envelope. I closed the suitcase. Then I picked it up and walked toward the door. Ryan straightened. "Emily," he said, "you're seriously leaving?" I stopped beside the kitchen counter and picked up the champagne bottle. For a second, I considered opening it. Then I set it back down. "You gave me an exit," I said. Then I waited. And for the first time that night, Ryan looked unsure. The thing he didn't know yet was that someone had already called me 3 days earlier. A stranger. Someone who had access to messages, hotel reservations, and timestamps. And the first thing she said to me was, "I think we're both dating the same man." I picked up my suitcase. Then I walked out. And Ryan still didn't understand what had already started moving quietly behind the scenes. Not yet. I drove to a furnished rental in Cherry Creek that night. It was the kind of place designed for people in transition. Neutral walls. Minimal furniture. White towels folded too neatly in the bathroom. A living room that looked finished but not lived in. When I opened the door, the air smelled faintly like laundry detergent and new paint. I set my suitcase by the sofa, placed my laptop on the dining table, and stood there listening to the quiet. No television in the next room. No footsteps. No phone vibrating against the kitchen counter. Just the soft sound of traffic from the street below and the hum of the air vent. I took off my shoes, washed my face, changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants. Then I sat at the small dining table and opened my laptop, not because I wanted to work, but because routine felt safer than thinking. A few emails came in from the office. One from legal. One from a lender. One from my managing director with a single line, "Great work on Westbrook. Strong close." I read it twice. Then I closed the laptop without replying. Around midnight, my phone lit up. "Ryan, are you seriously doing this? Ryan, you need to calm down. Ryan, this got out of hand for no reason." I read the messages once and put the phone face down. That was one of the first things I understood clearly after I left. He still thought the problem was the argument, not the pattern, not the lying, not the way he had slowly trained every concern into something I was supposed to apologize for. Just the argument. I slept badly that first night, not because I missed him, because my body still felt like it was waiting for the next conversation. In the morning, light came through the blinds in narrow stripes across the floor. I made coffee in a machine that took small silver pods and tasted vaguely metallic. I stood barefoot in the kitchen and looked out at the parking garage across the street. Then I made a list. Not a dramatic one, just practical. 1. Extend the rental for 2 weeks. 2. Move direct deposit for my portion of shared utilities. 3. Collect the rest of my things later with someone present. 4. Review the screenshots again, slowly. That fourth line sat there longer than the others. I had not gone through the evidence carefully yet. I had only looked at enough to stop doubting what I already knew. The call had come 3 days before the breakup, just after lunch on a Monday. I had been in the lobby of our office tower downtown, waiting for the elevator after a meeting with a developer. I still remember the smell of coffee from the kiosk near the entrance and the sound of heels clicking over the stone floor. My phone rang from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "Emily?" The voice was female. Careful. Not emotional. Just tight. "Yes." There was a short pause. "My name is Megan," she said. "I think you live with Ryan." I moved away from the elevator bank and into the quieter hallway near the conference rooms. "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" Another pause. "I'm Claire's boyfriend," she said. Then she corrected herself. "Ex-boyfriend, I guess." "I'm sorry. I know that sounds strange." I stopped walking. People moved past me carrying coffee cups and leather portfolios. Someone laughed near the reception desk. Everything around me kept going at its normal speed. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I found messages," she said, "between Claire and Ryan. A lot of them." She didn't rush. She didn't fill the silence. That, more than anything, made me listen. "There are hotel confirmations," she continued. "Dinner reservations. Photos." I checked dates. This has been going on for months. I leaned against the wall beside a framed print of the Denver skyline. For a second, I thought I might feel dizzy. I didn't. What I felt was something quieter. Recognition. Like hearing the name of a song you've been trying to remember for weeks. I asked her 3 questions. "How long? How sure are you? Why are you calling me?" She answered each one directly. "Since at least February." Completely. Because if it were me, I'd want someone to tell me. I remember looking down at my left hand, still holding my office badge. My nails were chipped at the corners. There was a faint ink mark near my thumb from signing closing documents earlier that morning. "Can you send me what you found?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "But I need you to understand something first. He knows how to talk his way around this. Claire does too. If you ask without evidence in front of you, they'll make it sound smaller than it is." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was organized. Megan wasn't calling to vent. She had already done the part where emotions run ahead of facts. She was calling with dates, screenshots, and a timeline. 10 minutes later, 3 files landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple. For your records, I didn't open them right away. I went up to my floor, sat through a development review meeting, made 2 calls, revised a memo, signed off on a property abstract. Then at 4:20 p.m., I closed my office door and opened the first screenshot. Ryan's name was at the top. Claire had sent him a message at 11:14 p.m. the previous Thursday. "Still thinking about dinner. Next time, don't leave so early." His reply came 3 minutes later. "Had to. She was awake when I got back." There were more. Too many to misread. Some were careless. Some were familiar. One included a hotel confirmation forwarded from Ryan's email. One was a screenshot of a reservation under his name for a boutique hotel in Lodo on a Saturday afternoon when he had told me he was helping a friend move. I printed 3 of them before I let myself stop. Not because I needed all of it, because I needed enough. Enough to interrupt the part of my mind that still wanted to explain things in the kindest possible way. That evening, I came home and watched him make pasta while telling me about an issue at work that I now knew had never happened. The pan hissed softly on the stove. Garlic and olive oil warmed the kitchen. Ryan moved easily, like someone entirely at home inside his own version of events. I stood by the sink, listening, and that was when I understood something that changed the shape of the whole week. He wasn't confused. He was comfortable. There's a difference. Confused people hesitate. They stumble. They tell the truth badly. Comfortable people look you in the face and adjust the story in real time. After dinner, he sat on the couch with his laptop and asked if I wanted to start a new series we'd been saving. I said I was tired. Then I went into the bedroom, opened my desk drawer, and placed the printed screenshots into a plain white envelope. I put the envelope back under a stack of old warranty papers and unopened mail. Then I waited, not because I was afraid, because I wanted one clean moment when he revealed himself without my help. And Thursday gave me exactly that. Back in the rental, I opened the envelope again and laid the pages flat on the dining table. The paper edges were slightly curled. The hotel receipt was printed crookedly, like it had come from a self-service kiosk or a rushed front desk clerk. One timestamp was still visible in the corner, 6:42 p.m. I looked at each page carefully. Then I made another list, this time on the back of an old receipt from the rental desk. What I knew, he had lied repeatedly. He had kept seeing her after I said I was uncomfortable. He had expected me to stay even after saying we should break up. He still believed he controlled the pace of what happened next. That last point mattered, because once I saw it, the next steps became simpler. I did not need a long argument. I did not need a confession shaped the exact way I wanted. I did not need him to finally become honest. I needed my belongings. I needed financial separation. And I needed one conversation conducted in daylight with facts already settled. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Derek from work. "You disappeared fast last night. You okay?" I looked at the message for a moment before typing back. "Fine. Just handling something." He replied almost immediately. "If handling something includes not eating, I'm bringing you coffee tomorrow." I smiled a little at that. Not because it fixed anything, just because it felt normal. The next morning, he showed up with coffee in a paper cup and a plain bagel wrapped in wax paper. He set both on my desk, looked at my face once, and said, "I'm not asking unless you want me to." "That's appreciated," I said. He nodded. Then he noticed the envelope on the corner of my desk. He didn't touch it. Didn't ask. "Do you need a witness when you go back for your stuff?" he asked. I looked at him then. "Yes," I said. "Okay," he replied. "Tell me when." There are moments when people reveal themselves kindly, without performance. That was one of them. I spent that day doing what I always did. Calls. Leasing notes. Acquisition models. A lunch I barely tasted. By evening, I had extended the rental, redirected 2 bills, and scheduled a time on Saturday to go back to the apartment with Derek. Ryan sent 6 more texts that day. Some annoyed. Some self-protective. One almost tender in a way that felt manufactured. Then one came through just after 8 p.m. "Can we talk in person? I feel like you've made decisions based on one bad night." I read it twice. Then I opened the envelope again and looked at the printed messages spread across the table. One bad night. I folded the pages carefully, put them back inside, smoothed the flap with my thumb. Then I typed Saturday, 11 a.m. "I'll come by for the rest of my things. We can talk then." He replied in under a minute. "Good. Thank you." I set the phone down and looked out the window toward the lights of the parking deck across the street. Saturday would not be a reconciliation. It would be a review. And by then, I had already decided that if he lied even once, I would place the envelope on the table, let the paper do the speaking, and leave. Then I waited. Saturday morning arrived quietly. The sky over Denver was pale and clear, the kind of cool autumn morning where the air feels sharp when you first step outside. I stopped at a small cafe near the rental and bought coffee in a paper cup that was almost too hot to hold. The barista wrote Emily across the lid in black marker. I stood near the window for a minute, watching people move along the sidewalk. A man walking a dog, a couple carrying grocery bags, 2 cyclists waiting at the light. Normal life continuing. Then I got back in my car and drove toward the apartment. Ryan and I had lived there for 8 months. A second-floor unit with wide windows and a small balcony that overlooked a row of maple trees. When I pulled into the parking lot, the leaves were already starting to turn. Derek's car was parked near the entrance. He stepped out when he saw me arrive. Jeans, gray jacket, coffee in one hand. "You ready?" he asked. "Yes." He didn't say anything else. That was one of the things I appreciated about him. He understood when quiet was the correct form of support. We walked up the stairs together. Ryan opened the door before we knocked, like he had been standing just behind it waiting. For a moment, he looked relieved. Then he saw Derek. His expression changed slightly. "Oh," he said. "You brought someone." "Yes," I replied calmly. "Just to help with boxes." Derek gave a polite nod. Ryan stepped aside to let us in. The apartment looked almost the same as when I left. My coffee mug still sat beside the sink. A magazine lay open on the couch arm. The plant near the window had been watered recently. Small details that suggested everything had continued as if nothing had happened. Ryan closed the door behind us. "Do you want to talk first?" he asked. I set my bag down beside the hallway wall. "No," I said. "I'll gather my things. Then we can talk." He hesitated, clearly wanting the conversation to happen before the logistics. But he nodded. "Okay." Derek moved quietly through the apartment with me while I collected what belonged to me. Clothes. A laptop stand. 2 framed photos from a shelf. A set of kitchen knives my sister had given me when I moved in. We worked slowly, deliberately. Ryan stood in the living room watching. Every so often, he tried to start a conversation. "You didn't answer my texts. You really moved out that night? You're acting like this is permanent." I didn't respond to most of it. Instead, I folded a sweater and placed it carefully inside a box. The sound of cardboard shifting echoed softly in the room. After about 20 minutes, the bedroom was mostly cleared. I picked up the last item from the nightstand, a small notebook where I kept work reminders and personal lists. Then I walked back into the living room. Ryan was standing near the kitchen counter. "Emily," he said, exhaling slowly, "can we please just talk like normal adults for a minute?" I set the notebook inside my bag. "That's what we're doing," I said. "No," he replied, shaking his head. "You're acting like I did something unforgivable." I looked at him for a moment. "You did." He frowned slightly. "I went to dinner with someone I used to date," he said. "That's not a crime." Derek stayed quiet near the door, leaning against the wall with his arms loosely crossed. Ryan continued. "You blew it up into something bigger than it is." I listened. That was the moment I had been waiting for. Not because I wanted him to confess. Because I wanted to see whether he would tell the truth when the room was calm. He didn't. So I opened my bag. Inside was the plain white envelope. Ryan noticed it immediately. "What's that?" he asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out the first printed page and placed it on the kitchen counter between us. The paper made a soft sliding sound across the surface. Ryan looked down. It took him about 3 seconds to recognize what he was seeing. The color in his face shifted slightly. "That's," he started. I placed the second page beside it, then the hotel receipt. Now the 3 documents sat in a neat row under the kitchen light. For a moment, no one spoke. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind us. Ryan picked up the first page and stared at it. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "A person who thought I deserved to know," I replied. His eyes moved quickly across the messages. The timestamps. The confirmation email. I watched his expression change in stages. Confusion. Recognition. Calculation. Finally, he set the paper down again. "This doesn't show what you think it shows," he said. That sentence was interesting. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I made a mistake." Just a negotiation with the evidence. I folded my hands lightly on the counter. "It shows enough," I said. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "This was complicated," he said quickly. Claire and I were just figuring things out. For months, I replied. He looked at the receipt again. It wasn't like that, he said. Derek shifted his weight slightly near the door but remained silent. Ryan continued speaking, words arriving faster now. I didn't want to hurt you, he said. I was trying to sort things out before making any decisions. I nodded once. Yes, I said. You were. That answer seemed to confuse him. You understand that then, he said. I understand exactly what happened. I picked up the envelope and slid the papers back inside. Ryan watched the motion carefully. What happens now, he asked. The question sounded less confident than the others. I zipped my bag. What happens now, I said calmly, is that I finish moving my things out. That's it, he asked. Yes. He looked at Derek, then back at me. You're really going to end a 2-year relationship over this? I paused for a moment. No, I said. Then I met his eyes. The relationship ended months ago. The room went quiet again. Outside, a car passed slowly through the parking lot. Ryan leaned back against the counter, arms folded, processing what had just happened. For the first time since I arrived, he looked uncertain about what move came next. And that uncertainty changed the balance of the conversation completely, because now the evidence was no longer theoretical. It was sitting in a white envelope inside my bag, and the next step would not be emotional. It would be procedural. I picked up one of the boxes Derek had packed and walked toward the door. Emily, Ryan said. I stopped but didn't turn yet. There's still something we need to discuss. I waited. And when I finally turned around, he said something I hadn't expected. You can't just disappear like this. I looked at him calmly. Then I answered. That depends, I said quietly. On what? He asked. I rested my hand on the door handle. On whether you think you still get a vote in what I do next. Then I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. We loaded the last box into Derek's car just before noon. The sunlight had warmed the parking lot by then. Dry leaves collected near the curb and shifted every time a car passed. I stood for a moment with my hand on the trunk after Derek closed it. You good? He asked. Yes, I said. He looked at me for a second, like he was deciding whether to believe that. Then he nodded. I'll take these to the rental, he said. You want me to stay around? No. I have one more stop. He didn't ask where. That was another kindness. After he left, I got into my own car and sat with both hands on the steering wheel. The inside still smelled faintly like coffee and leather. My phone was on the passenger seat, screen dark. I picked it up and opened my notes app. Then I made a second list. Not about feelings, about sequence. Step 1, separate the practical things. Step 2, lock down the shared money. Step 3, close the communication loop cleanly. When I was younger, I used to think calm decisions came from having no emotion. That turned out not to be true. Calm decisions come from putting emotion in its proper place. Not at the center, just nearby. That afternoon, I drove to my bank branch on Colorado Boulevard and sat with a woman named Janine at a small desk near the back. The office smelled faintly of printer toner and carpet cleaner. She wore a navy blazer and rectangular glasses and spoke in the low, efficient voice of someone who handled other people's problems all day without absorbing them. I explained that I needed to remove my automatic transfers tied to one shared household account and update my billing address for anything linked to the apartment. Is this a fraud issue or a personal separation issue? She asked. Personal, I said. She nodded once and turned her monitor slightly. Then we'll treat it as immediate account protection. That phrasing stayed with me. Not crisis. Not conflict. Protection. Within 20 minutes, 3 things were done. My transfers were canceled. My statement address was updated. And a standing payment I had set up for the rent overage was removed. Janine printed the confirmations and slid them across the desk in a clean stack. Keep these with your records, she said. I thanked her, placed the papers into my folder, and walked back out into the bright afternoon feeling steadier than I had that morning. There is something very clarifying about paperwork. A decision becomes real when it appears in writing. From there I drove to the building management office at the apartment complex. The manager, Luis, was there on weekends sometimes, and fortunately he was in that day. He sat behind a desk with a small fan turning slowly beside him. The office smelled like dust, coffee, and old file folders. I explained that I had moved out and wanted to know what, if anything, I needed to document regarding my occupancy and key return if my name was not the primary leaseholder. Luis pulled up the file. "You're listed as an authorized occupant, not the lease owner," he said. "So you're not financially liable beyond anything you personally arranged with him." That answer mattered. I asked him to print the occupant record. He did. Then I asked one more question. "If I need to retrieve anything else later, can I request building access logs for today just to show I removed my property?" Luis looked mildly surprised, then nodded. "We can verify entry times if needed," he said. I thanked him and added that paper to the folder too. By the time I got back into the car, I had 4 documents sitting in a neat stack on the passenger seat. Bank confirmation of canceled transfers, updated billing address, notice, occupant status, printout, building access verification option, noted with date. None of it was dramatic. That was exactly why it mattered. Ryan had spent months operating in a place where everything stayed verbal. Vague plans, soft denials, flexible timelines, interpretations. I was no longer living there. By late afternoon, I was back at the rental, sitting at the dining table with the folder open in front of me. The blinds were half closed, and bars of light fell across the papers. I made tea in a mug that was too small and slightly chipped at the rim. Then I reviewed everything one more time. The screenshots from Megan, the hotel receipt, the account confirmations, the lease status printout. I arranged them by function, not emotion. Proof of deception. Proof of separation. Proof of independence. Then I did something I had been putting off. I called Megan. She answered on the second ring. "Hi," she said carefully. "Hi, it's Emily." There was a small pause. "How are you?" she asked. It was a considerate question, but not a useful one. "So far, organized," I said. She gave a short, tired laugh. "That's better than how I was." We spoke for 15 minutes. Long enough to confirm timelines. Long enough to compare a few details we had both already guessed were true. Ryan had told Claire I was controlling. Claire had told Megan that Ryan and I were basically finished. The overlap in those stories was almost mechanical. 2 people making room for their behavior by shrinking the people around them. Megan mentioned one thing that made me sit back in my chair. "There's more," she said. "Not just messages. He sent her money once. For a hotel deposit. She joked about paying him back after." I looked down at the pages in front of me. "Do you have that?" I asked. "Yes." "Would you send it?" A minute later, my phone buzzed. It was a screenshot of a payment confirmation. Ryan's name visible. Amount clearly listed. Date matching one of the weekends he had told me he was at a coworker's birthday dinner. I saved the image. Then I thanked her. Before hanging up, Megan said something I thought about for a long time afterward. "Don't waste a clean ending by trying to make him understand it," she said. I didn't answer right away. Because she was right. Some people understand consequences perfectly. They just dislike receiving them. That evening, Ryan finally called instead of texting. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice came in too quickly, already defensive. "So now you're talking to other people about our relationship?" I leaned back in my chair. The tea had gone lukewarm beside me. "No," I said. "I'm gathering facts about my own life." He exhaled sharply. "This is getting out of hand." "No," I replied. "It already was. I'm just seeing the full shape of it now." He was quiet for a second. Then he shifted tone, moving from anger to something softer, more persuasive. "Emily, listen. I know this looks bad. It is bad. That's not what I mean." I looked at the payment screenshot on the table. "I know," I said. There was a pause on the line. "What do you want from me?" he asked. That question was useful because it showed he still misunderstood the structure of the moment. He thought this was a negotiation with an emotional price. "It's simple," I said. "I want 3 things." He said nothing. I looked at my list. First, no more contact unless it's about property or logistics. Second, do not use my name in any explanation to other people. Third, if anything still belonging to me turns up in that apartment, you send a photo and leave it with the front office. He let out a disbelieving laugh. "That's it?" "Yes." "So you're just done?" I looked out the window toward the street below, where someone was walking home carrying flowers wrapped in brown paper. Yes, I said. He was silent long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. You're making this very cold. That sentence might have worked on an earlier version of me, but cold wasn't the right word. Order was. I'm making it clear, I said. Another pause. Then, more carefully, did you tell anyone at work? No, so Derek just happened to show up? Yes. He seemed to consider that. Then he asked the question he had really wanted to ask since Saturday. Are you seeing someone? I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. No, I said. And that has nothing to do with this. It kind of does. It doesn't. He started to say something else, but I cut in before he could reset the conversation in his favor. This is the last phone call, I said. If you need to send information about my things, text it. Otherwise, don't contact me again. Emily, I ended the call. Then I placed the phone face down beside the folder. And I sat very still for a while, listening to the vent hum and the faint sounds of traffic outside. Silence, when chosen, has structure. It protects the next step. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and checked my email out of habit. There was one new message from Patrick, a college friend I had not seen in years except briefly at industry events. The subject line read, Singapore roll. If you're serious, call me Monday. I stared at it longer than I expected to, because suddenly the sequence on my notes app no longer ended with separation. It ended with movement. I clicked the email open. Then I waited. I read Patrick's email twice before I replied. The rental was still dim. Early morning light had only started to gather at the edges of the blinds, and the room had that flat, quiet apartments have before the day begins. I was sitting at the table in socks, one hand around a mug of coffee that had gone warm while I was thinking. His message was short. Singapore roll. If you're serious, call me Monday. Senior acquisitions. Regional scope. I think you'd be excellent for it. No overselling. No pressure. Just an opening. I wrote back, I'm serious. Available after 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. There was a small park 3 blocks from the rental. Nothing special. Concrete paths, a few benches, one line of low trees losing their leaves. A groundskeeper was blowing debris into neat piles near the curb. The machine made a steady mechanical roar that filled the cold air. I walked one lap slowly, then another. By the time I got back, my mind had settled into the shape I needed. Not emotional, not uncertain, just clear. Monday morning, Patrick called exactly at 10:07. He sounded almost the same as he had in college. Slightly more measured, maybe. Less restless. We talked for 40 minutes. The role was real. A senior acquisitions position in their Singapore office, focused on mixed-use commercial assets across a regional portfolio. More responsibility, better compensation, a cleaner reporting structure, a team I would not need to build from scratch. At one point he said, you'd need to move fast. I looked down at the folder still sitting on the table beside my laptop. I can do that, I said. By the end of the call, he told me HR would send materials within the day. When we hung up, I sat still for a minute. Then I opened my notes app again. Step 1, confirm interest. Step 2, review package. Step 3, decide without consulting the past. That last line mattered, because people often call it impulsive when a woman makes a clean decision quickly. What they usually mean is that she decided without asking permission from the people who benefited from her hesitation. The offer package arrived that afternoon. Salary, housing support, relocation assistance, start window, immigration process, reporting line, expected travel, everything clearly stated. I printed it and placed it in a separate folder from the other documents. That distinction felt important. One folder was evidence of what had ended. The other was paperwork for what could begin. Ryan texted that evening. Found one of your scarves in the hall closet. I looked at the message and waited a full minute before replying. Photo. Front office drop-off only. He didn't respond for nearly an hour. Then a photo came through. Navy wool scarf. Mine. I answered with one line. Leave it tomorrow. Thank you. He called 30 seconds later. I let it ring out. Then came the text I had expected sooner or later. Can we please talk in person one last time? Properly. No audience. No interruptions. I set the phone down and looked at the 2 folders on the table. There are moments when avoiding a conversation keeps things clean. And there are moments when one final conversation closes the loop more completely than silence can. I thought about it for a few minutes, then texted back, Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. lobby cafe at the Halcyon Hotel. 30 minutes. A public place. Neutral ground. No apartment. No private room. No ambiguity. He responded immediately. Okay, thank you. The next day moved in a practical rhythm. I picked up the scarf from the front office, reviewed immigration notes from HR, forwarded the offer package to my personal email, took 2 calls from work, ate lunch at my desk. By 4:45, I changed out of office clothes into a cream sweater and dark slacks, tied my hair back, and left for the hotel. The lobby cafe was quiet when I arrived. Soft music, glass walls facing the street, lamps with warm shades set low over the seating area. The air smelled faintly of espresso and polished wood. I chose a table near the center of the room, visible from the entrance and not tucked into a corner. Then I ordered tea. Ryan arrived 6 minutes late. He looked like he had put thought into looking composed. Dark jacket, pressed shirt, careful expression. He scanned the room, found me, and came over with the kind of cautious half-smile people use when they think they may still be able to fix the tone if not the facts. Hi, he said. Hi. He sat across from me. A server passed between us carrying 2 cappuccinos on a tray. Somewhere behind the counter, cups touched softly against ceramic. Ryan rested both hands on the table. You look good, he said. I nodded once and didn't respond. That was the first small disruption to the rhythm he expected. He leaned back slightly. I've had some time to think, he said. And I know I handled everything badly. I stirred my tea once and set the spoon down. Okay, I said. He seemed to wait for more. When I didn't fill the silence, he continued. I'm not here to lie to you. That was an interesting opening. People who are telling the truth usually begin with the truth itself. He went on. I should have been honest sooner. Things with Claire were complicated. I looked at him calmly. They weren't complicated, I said. They were hidden. His jaw shifted slightly. That's not completely fair. It is. The server brought him coffee. He thanked her, waited for her to leave, then lowered his voice. You're reducing everything to the worst version of it. No, I said. I'm reducing it to the documented version. That landed. He looked at me for a moment, then down at his cup. For the first time since sitting down, he seemed to understand that charm would not help him here. I didn't plan for it to happen like that, he said. I folded my hands lightly in my lap. That explanation only works for the first lie, I said. Not the weeks after. He exhaled through his nose and glanced toward the window. Outside, headlights moved steadily through the early evening traffic. When he looked back at me, the softer approach was gone. So that's it? He asked. You've decided I'm the villain and there's no room for anything else? I took a sip of tea before answering. This isn't about roles, I said. It's about sequence. He frowned. I continued. You reconnected with your ex. You hid it. You kept seeing her after I raised concerns. You made me question my own judgment. And when I asked for honesty, you offered a breakup like it was leverage. He opened his mouth, but I went on before he could interrupt. Then when I accepted it, you were surprised. That part seems to bother you more than what you did. He stared at me. The table between us suddenly felt very exact. My cup, his coffee, the folded napkin, the small candle near the edge of the table burning steadily inside glass. That's not true, he said quietly. It is. He leaned forward, elbows almost touching the table. I loved you. I held his gaze. I think you loved being safe with me, I said. That's not the same thing. He looked away first. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he tried one more angle. Are you really leaving because of this? He asked. There it was. Not what happened. Not the harm. Not the lying. The inconvenience of consequences. Yes, I said. His eyes narrowed slightly. So you are leaving. I paused for half a second. That told me something important. He didn't know for certain yet. He had heard enough, guessed enough, maybe asked enough questions through mutual friends, but he did not know. I could have said nothing. Instead, I chose accuracy. Yes, I repeated. I'm taking a role in Singapore. He sat back slowly. For the first time that evening, he looked genuinely unsettled. You already accepted? I'm in the process. When were you going to tell me? I let the question sit between us. Then I answered in the most direct way possible. I wasn't. He blinked once, as if he hadn't heard correctly. What does that mean? It means, I said, that once we broke up, my plans stopped involving you. His voice tightened. 2 years, Emily. Yes. And you can just leave the country. Yes. He gave a short, disbelieving laugh and rubbed his hand across his mouth. This is extreme. No, I said. It's proportionate. He looked offended by that word. But it was the right one. Not revenge. Not performance. Just a measured response to clear information. He lowered his voice again. Do you even care what happens to me? That question surprised me, not because it was emotional, but because it was so centered in the wrong place. I care enough not to keep participating in something dishonest, I said. That's not an answer. It is the only one you need. He shook his head slowly. You've become very cold. I looked at him for a moment. No, I said. I've become precise. That was the line that ended the meeting, even before either of us stood up. I could see it in his face. He understood then that there would be no reopening of the case. No appeal to memory. No sudden emotional reversal. No private softness he could still reach if he said the correct combination of words. The structure had changed. He was no longer speaking to the version of me who explained herself until other people felt comfortable. I checked the time on my phone. 29 minutes. I stood, placed cash under the edge of my saucer for the tea, and picked up my bag. Ryan looked up. That's it? He asked. Yes. He rose too, not quickly, but with that restless energy people have when they know the conversation is over and do not know where to put their hands. Emily. I waited. His expression shifted once more, this time into something closer to fatigue than persuasion. I really did lose something good, he said. I believed he meant that. But meaning it late does not make it useful. Yes, I said. Then I walked away. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just steadily, through the hotel lobby, past the front desk, out into the evening air where the city sounded like itself again. When I got into my car, I locked the doors, set my bag in the passenger seat, and sat with my hands on the wheel. Then I did one practical thing before driving away. I blocked his number. And as the screen changed and his contact disappeared from the recent calls list, a new email banner slid quietly across the top of my phone. It was from HR in Singapore. I stayed in the car for a moment with the email banner still visible across the screen. Final review packet attached. Relocation timing confirmed. The parking garage lights had come on by then. Their reflection stretched across the windshield in pale yellow lines, and for a few seconds I just sat there listening to the soft ticking of the engine cooling. Then I opened the email. The attachment included the revised compensation sheet, relocation schedule, immigration support contact, and a formal start window. The language was clean and exact. Dates. Figures. Process. No vague promises. No room for interpretation. I saved the file to both my phone and laptop. Then I drove back to the rental. That night, I spread both folders across the dining table again. The old life on the left, the new one on the right. One stack of pages tied to lies, denials, and improvised explanations. The other tied to contracts, dates, and a city I had never lived in. I remember looking at the two piles and realizing how different they felt in my hands. One was heavy in the wrong way. The other was heavy with structure. I spent the next hour moving through everything methodically. I signed a preliminary acceptance letter. I scanned my passport. I completed the relocation questionnaire. I uploaded my current employment information. I confirmed that I could begin within the requested window. Then I made one more list. Before departure, finalize resignation timing clear the apartment items issue, close shared utility, overlap, sort personal records, book medical paperwork appointment pack. Only what mattered, nothing on that list involved Ryan. That was the point. The next morning, I went into the office earlier than usual. The elevator ride up was quiet. Someone beside me smelled faintly of cedar cologne and fresh laundry. When the doors opened on our floor, the lights were still dim in parts of the hallway. I set my bag down, turned on my desk lamp, and began drafting a resignation letter. Not immediate, not emotional, not detailed, just factual. I thanked the firm for the work, confirmed my final transition window, and stated that I had accepted an international role aligned with my long-term acquisitions path. Then I printed it on firm letterhead paper, signed it, and placed it in a plain folder. At 9:30, I knocked on my managing director's office door. He looked up from his screen and motioned me in. He was a practical man in his late 50s who rarely wasted words. His office always smelled faintly of paper, black coffee, and the leather chair behind his desk. I handed him the folder and waited while he read the letter. When he finished, he set it down carefully. "Singapore," he said. "Yes." He leaned back slightly. "That's a serious move." "Yes." He looked at me for another moment, then asked, "Is this about career, or is this about leaving something?" The question was more perceptive than I expected. I answered honestly. "It started as one," I said. "Now it's both." He nodded once, as if that made complete sense. "When?" I gave him the transition window. He asked a few practical questions after that. Handover status, active files, client exposure, which projects I could wrap cleanly and which would need reassignment. We spoke for 15 minutes, and by the end of it, he stood up and offered his hand. "You've done strong work here," he said. "If this is the right next move, take it properly." That was all. No guilt, no pressure, no speech about loyalty, just permission to leave well. When I stepped back into the hallway, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. By noon, HR had my resignation. By 3, I had a transition schedule. By 5, 2 deals had been reassigned and 1 closing remained under my control until the end of the month. Again, none of it was dramatic. But that is how real endings usually happen. Not in one speech, in a series of updated records. That evening, as I was packing books into a cardboard box at the rental, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification from an unknown number. I stared at it for a second before pressing play. It was Ryan. Not angry this time. Tired. "Emily, I know you blocked me. I'm calling from my office line. I want to say I'm sorry in a way that doesn't sound rehearsed. I know I handled everything badly. I know I hurt you. I heard you're really going." I didn't think. He stopped there, and for a second all I could hear was air moving through the line. Then he finished quietly. I didn't think it would actually end like this. I deleted the voicemail without saving it, because by then, he was not providing new information. He was only catching up to information I had already acted on. 2 days later, the remaining practical issue resolved itself through paperwork. One of the shared utility companies sent a closing statement showing my payment history over the previous 8 months. I printed it, highlighted the amounts, and attached it to an email requesting removal of my billing responsibility effective the date I moved out. They confirmed the update within the day. An hour later, the apartment management office emailed me a short verification that I had retrieved my belongings on Saturday during authorized access hours as an occupant of record. I saved that too. Then, later that afternoon, Megan sent one final message. "Claire moved out yesterday. She found messages to someone else. I thought you'd want to know." I read it once and set my phone down. No satisfaction. No shock. Just a quiet sense of pattern completing itself. He had not made one terrible decision and collapsed under the weight of regret. He had simply continued being the same person in every direction available to him. And once that became visible, the story no longer needed my emotional attention. I replied with one line, "Thank you for telling me. I hope things get easier from here." She sent back, "You too." That was the last communication we had. The week before my flight, I sold a few things I didn't want to store. A side table, 2 lamps, a chair I had bought online when Ryan and I first moved in together. I donated clothing I hadn't worn in over a year. I shredded outdated paperwork. I sorted my bookshelf into 3 categories: take, store, leave. It's strange how much clarity can come from making piles. Each object requires a decision. And after enough decisions, your mind begins to trust itself again. Patrick called once during that week to confirm the relocation timeline and put me in touch with someone already in the Singapore office. We spoke briefly. He asked if I felt ready. Yes, I said. And I meant it. Not perfectly ready. Not fearlessly ready. Just ready enough. The night before I left, I received one more message from an unknown international number. No name attached. Just text. I know I don't deserve a reply. I just need you to know I understand now what I lost. I looked at the screen for a few seconds. Then I deleted it. Because the truth had already been revealed through everything that mattered. Through dates. Through receipts. Through messages. Through the timing of apologies. Through the speed with which he only reached for language once consequences became real. That was the resolution. Not a confession. A timeline. He lied. He repeated it. He assumed I would stay. He discovered I wouldn't. And every consequence after that followed naturally from the first fact he refused to respect, that I was capable of leaving cleanly. The next morning, before sunrise, I zipped my final suitcase and placed both folders inside my carry-on. Not because I intended to read them again. Because they marked the 2 halves of the story accurately. Evidence of what ended. Paperwork for what began. Then I turned off the apartment lights, picked up my keys, and headed for the door. At the threshold, I paused for a second. The room behind me was nearly empty now. Just the rented furniture, the folded blanket on the couch, the faint smell of cardboard and tea. I locked the door. And when I stepped into the hallway, my phone vibrated once with a calendar alert I had almost forgotten to remove. Airport car, 6:15 a.m. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket. Then I walked toward the elevator. The airport car arrived at 6:12. I remember because I was standing by the window with one hand around a mug of tea I hadn't finished, watching the headlights turn into the lot below. The rental apartment was almost empty behind me. One suitcase by the door. One carry-on on the chair. The air smelled faintly of cardboard, clean fabric, and the lemon dish soap that came with the unit. I set the mug in the sink, checked the counters one last time, and turned off the kitchen light. Then I left. The ride to the airport was quiet. The driver kept the radio low, some early morning news station with calm voices and traffic updates I barely heard. Outside, Denver was still half asleep. Streetlights. Delivery trucks. A few runners at intersections waiting for the signal. The windows of office buildings reflected the first thin line of morning. At the terminal, everything moved in the usual order. Passport. Bag drop. Security. Shoes back on. Laptop back in place. There is something deeply calming about procedures when your personal life has recently been the opposite. By the time I reached my gate, the sun had come up fully. I bought another tea and sat near the window where I could see the planes being pushed back from their gates one by one. The chairs were cold through my coat. Somewhere nearby, a child was asking repeated questions about takeoff. Someone unwrapped a breakfast sandwich, and the smell of toasted bread drifted across the waiting area. I took out my phone. No new messages. That, more than anything, felt like peace. Not a dramatic peace. Not the kind people post about or try to name too quickly. Just the quiet absence of confusion. No one demanding access to my attention. No one asking for emotional labor after offering none. No one revising facts I had already confirmed for myself. When boarding started, I stood with everyone else, moved forward when my row was called, and found my seat without rushing. Then I put the phone face down. And that mattered. Because for months, maybe longer, I had been living in a state of partial vigilance, listening for shifts in tone, measuring small inconsistencies, noticing when explanations arrived too quickly or too smoothly. Even before I had proof, some part of me had been working overtime trying to make sense of what did not fit. That work was over. 6 weeks later, my life had a different shape. I had a small apartment in Singapore, high enough up that the city looked almost orderly from the window at night. The kitchen was narrow but efficient. The cabinets closed softly. In the morning, the light came in bright and clean across the counter, and I got into the habit of wiping everything down before I left for work. Not because it needed it, because order felt good. My routine became simple. Tea, email, work, walk home, laundry on Thursdays, groceries on Sunday evenings. I learned the nearest places without thinking about them. Which cafe made coffee too strong? Which crossing stayed crowded even late? Which grocery aisle had the brand of rice I liked? I bought 2 plants and kept one near the sink and one by the window. I replaced the rental hangers with wooden ones. I organized my documents into labeled folders and placed them in the top drawer of the desk. Small things. But small things are often what make a life feel like your own again. Work was demanding in the best way. New teams, new reporting lines, bigger assets, more moving parts. People judged me by the quality of my analysis, the speed of my decisions, the clarity of my work. Nothing else. There was relief in that. No one there knew the recent version of me. No one knew Ryan. No one knew Claire. No one knew the apartment, the envelope, the screenshots, the hotel receipt, the careful way I had learned to separate facts from excuses. I was not hiding any of it. It just no longer entered the room before I did. A few months after I moved, I developed a Saturday habit. I would clean the apartment in the morning, open the windows for a little while if the weather allowed it, wash the cups, fold the laundry, and then make tea around mid-afternoon. Sometimes I would sit at the small table near the window and review the coming week. Sometimes I would do nothing at all. That became my favorite part. Not needing every quiet moment to prove something. Just letting it be quiet. One Saturday, while I was sorting old digital files on my laptop, I found the folder where I had saved the screenshots Megan sent me. I looked at the file names for a second. Then I deleted the entire folder. Not out of anger. Not to pretend it hadn't happened. I deleted it because it had already done its job. The truth had served its purpose. I didn't need to carry the paper version of clarity forever just because it had once been necessary. That afternoon, I made tea, wiped down the kitchen counter, and stood for a few minutes watching rain collect on the outside of the window. I remember thinking, very simply, that my life felt solid again. Not perfect. Not cinematic. Just honest. That was enough. I heard 1 or 2 things about Ryan after that through people who still knew people back home. Nothing surprising. A short relationship that ended badly. Some version of regret. An attempt or 2 to reach me that never got through. By then, it all felt far away. Not because distance solves everything. Because some endings become complete the moment you stop reopening them. What stayed with me wasn't really him. It was the lesson. That you can be patient without being passive. That you can be kind without abandoning your own judgment. That silence, used correctly, can protect you better than argument ever will. And that once the facts are clear, peace usually begins with practical steps, not dramatic ones. A form, a receipt, a blocked number, a packed suitcase, a clean kitchen, a new key in your hand. A few weeks ago, someone new at work stayed behind after a meeting and asked if I had a minute. She was smart, composed, probably early 30s, the kind of person who keeps her personal life very still at work until she can't. She stood by the conference room table holding a printed deck against her chest and asked me, in a careful voice, whether I thought people always know when they're being lied to. I looked at her for a second. Then I told her the truth. Not always at first, but usually, if they stop explaining the other person's behavior long enough, they know much sooner than they admit. She nodded like that answer had landed somewhere important. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Some people don't need advice right away. They just need to stand near someone who has already walked through a similar door and knows that the other side is quiet, workable, and real. That was enough for both of us. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. And if this kind of calm, real-life story is something you enjoy, please like and subscribe. I'd also love to know which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. 2 popular stories will be waiting for you next.